Hey everyone, I'm back with my co-star Oscar. He's being a real good boy right now. So if you see a random tail or some cat ears in the screen, you know what it is. Uh, Today we are going to be looking at what life was like in the North and what was life like in the South in the mid 1800s. Ignore Oscar. Yesterday I had you all take a look at this picture, right? Or actually two pictures. One was of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the other was of a plantation in Mississippi. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen for a second. There we go. So now you should be able to, see my screen, right? And you can see this picture here of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A couple things I was hoping you all would see when we take a look at this picture. You can see the factories here. I think I looked at some people's responses. Most people mention the factories, right? You can notice, the river obviously stands out, right? The river also has some boats. It looks like a couple commercial boats along with some passenger boats, some smaller boats, right? I asked the question about the geography of this place. You can see the mountains in the background, obviously the river we talked about. The economy's probably going to be mainly based on this factory and also based on commerce by the river, right? People bringing products to Pittsburgh, right? People taking products from Pittsburgh. If we take a look at the second picture, it's a plantation in Mississippi. You can notice it's a lot flatter, right? No mountains in the background, right? You can see that they are growing some sort of crops. That crop is actually cotton. It's okay if you didn't know that. But that's the crop. You can tell because it's primarily white once it's picked. You can also see, and you might have missed this, there's a boat here in the back, right? That boat signifies that there is a river close to this plantation. You can see that people are traveling by horse and buggy, right? And basically today, we're going to go a little bit more in depth about what life was like in the North and the South. This picture was supposed to just kind of give you a brief idea of what it looked like, and hopefully we go over some more of it today, okay? So I'm going to go here. Give me a second. Perfect. So I'm going to start with the North, and then we're going to move to the South. First is the geography of the North. Okay, so the North is going to be different than the South in the sense that it has 4 really distinct seasons, right? And that what I mean by that is that there's going to be really cold winters pretty much everywhere in the North, but at the same time, pretty warm summers, right? So you're going to get a little bit of everything in the North, right? This picture, you can see kind of what the New England coast looks like. In my mind, the New England coast actually looks pretty similar to the Oregon coast, right? In the sense that you go there and, pretty much almost right into the end that you're seeing mountains, you're seeing rocks, right? That's going to make it tough for people in New England to farm, right? People that have experienced farming might be able to tell you it's a lot easier when you have really rich soil and things are flat, right? So the jagged New England coasts aren't going to be good for that, right? However, the plains that you find in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey are going to have really rich soil. Some of the best soil in the North, right? There's also a large forested region in the Central Plains, and that region is kind of, at this point in U.S. history, undergoing deforestation, right? People are chopping those trees. Oscar, stop scratching. Sorry, scratching my chair up. The region is kind of undergoing deforestation where they are chopping down trees for the lumber, right? All right. Economy of the North, right? So when we think about the economy of the North, right? The North's kind of the center of the Industrial Revolution in the country. And the Industrial Revolution, in short, basically a shift from manufacturing or creating everything by hand to having machines do it, right? This change is kind of, really changing the northern economy. People are, instead of having a craft that they're good at, they're going to a factory and they're having a job at that factory, right? And they're earning a wage at that factory, right? They're not going around and selling all the goods that they make. Instead, they're working for a company and they're getting a wage. This is kind of similar to how our system works today, right? Some people work for themselves and sell things. A lot of people also work for a company and they get a wage, right? That really starts with the Industrial Revolution. A lot of new inventions in manufacturing came up during this time, like steam-powered engines, and that just helped make goods cheaper and helped make a lot more of them, right? Industrialists tend to favor a strong national government just because the government could help provide loans, regulate business, regulate what can come in and out of the country. So in general, the northern industrialists tend to support a stronger national government. Okay. Transportation in the north, right? The National Railroad was a big thing, right? And that would help connect a lot of the new western states. At this point, the western states that I'm thinking of, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and help connect them to the eastern states. If you take a look at this map, and I know it's a little blurry, but you should be able to make out the key idea. This shows U.S. railroads, where they were located prior to the Civil War. You can see there's a ton right here, kind of in the American Northwest, right? There's a lot of more areas in the South without railroads, right? The invention of steamboats also helped make river travel faster and cheaper. Because of that, you saw the creation of canals, right? Canals are basically man-made rivers, right? So there might be two rivers, they don't quite connect, right? But you want to be able to get from one to another. So what they would do is they would create basically a man-made river to help connect two bodies of water, right? Lastly, society in the North. Many Northerners at this time were moving to towns and cities. Note that that's not everyone. There's still going to be lots of farmers in the North, right? But a lot more people are moving to towns and cities in comparison to the South, right? These cities weren't super nice, right? They lacked sewers, they didn't have paved streets, but people were moving to them nonetheless. Two of the things that are important to note about society in the North, African Americans were free in the North in the sense that the northern states no longer allowed slavery. However, African Americans did not receive equal rights in the North. They weren't allowed to vote. They weren't allowed to hold public office. A lot of times, employers wouldn't hire them, so they had to create their own businesses, which is tough if you don't have a lot of money. They weren't allowed in white churches, so a lot of them created their own churches. So when we compare African Americans in the North versus South, it's important to know that the North outlawed slavery. It's also important to know that they were not granted equal rights. Second thing is that immigrants tended to settle in these cities, right? The two major immigrant groups in the mid-1800s are going to be the Germans and the Irish, right? Immigrants tend to settle in cities because it's easier to get housing, it's easier to get a job. And since most of the major cities were in the North, most of the immigrants tended to settle in the North. It's important to point out the Irish faced a lot more discrimination as immigrants than the Germans. Part being that they were poorer, so they would take lower paying jobs than German immigrants. And they also had a different religion, right? Most of them are Roman Catholic, as opposed to most Germans who are Protestant, and most Americans at that time were Protestant as well. All right, shifting gears, heading to the South. If we look in the South tended to have mild winters, right? So we talked about the North having really cold winters, really hot summers, right? The South's going to be different. They still have those hot summers, right? They're hot, they're humid, but the winters are a lot less mild, right, than in the North. They had fertile coastal plains, means that it was easy to grow crops there with swamps and marshes. You'd have some rolling hills as you went east, thick pine forest, North Carolina. And the big thing, and this is going to be important when we talk about transportation and the economy, they had really broad or wide flat rivers, right? That's going to be important because it's going to make it really easy to travel by river in the South, right? Because they're not going to get too narrow, right? It's not going to be tough to travel on. So the amount of rivers in the South, it's going to be really important. If we move to the economy of the South was mainly based on agriculture or farming, right? Most of the farmers in the South worked on their own small farms, right? So it's important to know, even though we talked about slavery being part of the Southern economy, in which it was a huge part of the Southern economy, most farmers in the South did not own slaves simply because they couldn't afford them, right? And they had to do the work their own, right? There's going to be a small group of small plantation owners who had slaves to raise cash crops, particularly cotton. I know this map is really blurry. This one's the blurry one that I was thinking of. But if you take a look, there's those little, the cotton symbol is these little white dots with the green leaves under them. And I just really wanted you to see that so you could see where cotton was produced, right? A man named Eli Whitney, who was actually a Northerner who went to Yale, he invented something called the cotton gin, right? And think about cotton gin, cotton engine, right? That was the idea of it. And what the cotton gin did was it allowed people to pick the cotton, right? And then the machine would take the seeds out, right? Taking the seeds out of the cotton took a ton of time, right? And you would think this machine, since it allowed people to cultivate cotton a lot faster, would lead to a decline in slavery. It actually did the opposite, right? It made cotton the most important crop in the South. And then everyone wanted to get into that business, right? Because cotton was something that was really valuable. You can make clothes out of it. So all the textile industries in the North, the people who made clothes wanted to get access to the cotton, right? So it was really profitable to grow cotton if you could. However, growing the cotton, you needed a lot of labor, right? And a lot of Southerners who could afford it would use slave labor to cultivate that cotton. There's an example of what the cotton gin looked like, right? So you'd have to pick the cotton here, put it in the machine, and the machine would basically take the seeds out for you. Prior to that, you had to go individually and pick out the seeds, and it was just a lot more time consuming. Transportation in the South. So we talked about those rivers. The rivers were the main form of transportation, right? The smaller cities in the South tend to spring up right up on the rivers, right? Because that was going to be the easy way to transport goods and people from one place to another, right? So it made sense for the cities to be right on the rivers. Let's see. So society in the South, okay? So wealth was usually measured in the South by how much land one had and how many slaves one owned, right? Those were going to be the two things, because if you think about it, the way most Southerners became wealthy was by producing a lot of raw materials like cotton, tobacco, indigo, right? To do that, you needed a lot of land and you needed a lot of workers, right? Now they chose not to pay those workers, so wealth was generally measured in those two terms. And that created a kind of rigid social structure. And what I mean by that is kind of a hierarchy of power where the plantation owners are at the top, right? They had most of the money, most of the political power in the South. You'd have white farmers and workers kind of in the middle. They were still given the same political rights. Some of them were allowed to vote, but they certainly didn't have as much power as the plantation owners. And then you'd have African Americans at the bottom, most of whom were enslaved in the South, and those who weren't were really restricted on their rights and what they were able to do. Let's see, what have I said? I think I've covered that. Okay, so hopefully that helped kind of go over a few things, just to go over the differences between the North and the South. You're going to play a Kahoot game to review that. Some of the stuff is in the text. Some of the information is in this lecture, I will post the lecture slides that I was going over as well. So in case you want to go back and do those, you can. One quick thing about the Kahoot. Please use your real name because I am giving you credit for completing the assignment today based on whether or not you did the Kahoot. Okay, so if you do not put your name, there's no way for me to know if you actually did the Kahoot. Okay, so make sure you're putting your actual name as your name. Okay. As always, any questions, feel free to contact me whatever way you want. I hope you all are doing well, and I will see you all soon.